courtroom in the old county building smelled like wax and wood polish. It was the kind of room that still had a clock on the wall instead of a screen. The gallery was nearly full by 9 a.m. Farmers, mostly. A few had driven over an hour. They came because they knew Russell Hadley, or they knew his farm, or they knew the man who was trying to take it. The man's name was Vincent Calloway. He sat at the plaintiff's table in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people in the room earned in a month. Gold watch, leather shoes that had never touched dirt, 2 attorneys on either side of him with matching briefcases and matching expression. Calm, confident, practiced. Russell Hadley sat on the other side, 71 years old, thin white hair, hands that looked like they had been carved from the same oak as the courtroom furniture. He wore a clean shirt, buttoned to the collar, and pants he had probably ironed that morning himself. His lawyer, a man named Jack Petrie, sat beside him with a single folder. Between them, on the evidence table, sat a small plastic bag. Inside the bag was a clump of roots. Dark soil still clung to the tangled fibers. A few small particles of dirt had fallen through a gap in the seal and rested on the polished wood surface. No one in the courtroom understood yet why it was there. The dispute had started 18 months earlier. Russell's farm sat on 220 acres in the rolling hill country west of the river. The land had been in the Hadley family since 1936, when Russell's grandfather bought it at a foreclosure auction during the tail end of the Depression. The family had worked it continuously for 88 years. Cattle, hay, a small orchard on the south slope that Russell's mother had planted in 1958. The land was beautiful, but it wasn't valuable. Not the farming. The soil was decent, not great. The acreage was too hilly for large-scale row crops. The cattle operation covered expenses and not much more. For most of its history, nobody outside the county had any reason to care about the Hadley farm. Then the highway came through. 3 years ago, the state completed a new interchange 6 miles east. Within a year, developers were buying up every parcel within driving distance. Land that had sold for $1,200 an acre was suddenly worth $8,000. A golf course was proposed. A resort community was sketched on paper. The hills that made the land bad for farming made it perfect for luxury real estate. Vincent Calloway had purchased 1,400 acres surrounding the Hadley farm over the previous 2 years. Parcel by parcel, he had been patient, methodical, and generous with his offers. Most families took the money. The Petersons sold. The Sheffields sold. The Wares held out for 6 months before accepting double the appraised value. Russell was the last one. Calloway's first offer came by letter. $9,500 per acre, more than 7 times what the land had been worth 5 years earlier. Russell read it and set it on the kitchen table. He didn't respond. The second offer came by phone. $12,000 per acre, a total of $2.64 million. Calloway's representative mentioned the number twice, slowly, as if Russell might not have understood it the first time. Russell said no. The third offer came in person. Calloway himself drove out to the farm in a black SUV. He stepped out wearing loafers and a sports jacket. He walked toward the porch where Russell was sitting with a glass of water. Calloway extended his hand. "Mr. First Hadley, I'm Vincent Calloway." Russell shook it. "I know who you are." Calloway smiled. "Then you know I'm serious." He looked out across the fields. "I'll double your price, old man. Whatever number you have in your head, I'll beat it." Russell looked at him for a long moment. Then he stood up, walked to the edge of the porch, and pointed toward the south slope. "You see that orchard?" Calloway glanced in that direction. A few dozen fruit trees, old and gnarled, spread across the hillside. "What about it?" Russell sat back down. "That's my answer." Calloway stared at him. He wasn't used to answers. He didn't understand. He waited a moment. Then he smiled again, thinner this time. "You'll hear from my lawyers," he said. He walked back to the SUV without shaking Russell's hand again. 6 weeks later, Calloway filed a lawsuit. The claim was creative. His attorneys had discovered that a small section of the southern boundary of the Hadley property overlapped with a historical right-of-way that had been recorded in 1921, 15 years before the Hadleys purchased the land. The right-of-way was only 30 feet wide, running along the creek at the bottom of the south slope. But Calloway's lawyers argued that it gave him legal access through the property to reach a landlocked parcel he had recently purchased on the other side. If the court granted the access easement, Calloway would have a road cutting through Russell's farm. Heavy construction equipment, daily truck traffic, dust, noise, and damage to the creek banks. The farm would become unlivable. And Calloway knew it. It wasn't about the right-of-way. It was about pressure. Make the farm unbearable and the old man would sell. Russell's lawyer, Jack Petrie, had practiced real estate law in the county for 26 years. He reviewed the 1921 right-of-way filing and found it was genuine. A utility company had recorded it for potential telegraph line installation that never happened. The easement had never been used, never maintained, and never formally vacated. Calloway's lawyers argued it was still valid. Petrie argued it had been abandoned through non-use. The case went to trial. The first day of trial went the way Calloway expected. His attorneys presented the original 1921 filing. They produced surveyor testimony confirming the right-of-way alignment. They showed maps of Calloway's landlocked parcel and argued that the easement was the only reasonable access route. Calloway himself testified briefly. He described his development plans: new homes, a community park, economic growth for the county. He spoke like a man doing the region a favor. During a recess, he stood in the hallway and spoke to one of his attorneys loud enough for Russell to hear. No judge is going to block economic development over a hobby farm. He chuckled. This will be done by Thursday. Russell didn't react. He sat on the bench in the hallway and looked at the floor. The second day was Petrie's turn. He called Russell to the stand. Mr. Hadley, Petrie said, how long has your family owned the property? Since 1936, Russell said. My grandfather Emmett Hadley bought it at auction. He paused. 88 years. Petrie nodded. And in that time has anyone ever used the right-of-way along the southern creek? Russell shook his head. Never. Not once. No utility line. No road, no path. The only thing that's been on that creek bank is cattle and my mother's orchard. Calloway's lead attorney stood. Objection. The defendant's personal recollection doesn't override a recorded legal easement. The judge raised a hand. Overruled. Continue. Petrie walked to the evidence table. He picked up the plastic bag containing the roots. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit 1. He placed the bag on the table and opened the seal. He carefully pulled the clump of roots out and set it on a metal tray. Dark soil scattered on the surface. Small root fibers hung off the edges, tangled and dense. Calloway frowned. He leaned toward his attorney. What is that? Petrie turned to Russell. Mr. Hadley, can you tell the court what this is? Russell looked at the roots calmly. Those are roots from one of the apple trees in my mother's orchard. He paused. The one she planted in the spring of 1958. Petrie nodded. And where exactly was this root sample taken from? Russell pointed to the map that Calloway's attorneys had introduced the day before. Right here. He tapped the line marking the 1921 right-of-way, directly in the middle of the easement. Calloway's attorney stood again. A tree root doesn't void a legal easement. Petrie held up a hand. He walked back to the evidence table and placed a second document beside the roots. This is a report from the County Agricultural Extension Office. He opened it. They conducted a root depth and spread analysis on the orchard trees along the south slope last month. He placed the report in front of the judge. The analysis shows that the root systems of the mature apple trees planted in 1958 extend across the full width of the recorded right-of-way. He tapped the report. Some root networks reach 40 feet laterally from the trunk. Petrie pulled a third document from his folder. And this is a survey conducted by a licensed arborist. He placed it beside the extension report. The arborist confirmed that 11 of the 14 surviving orchard trees have root systems that cross, underlie, or are structurally integrated with the soil along the easement corridor. The judge read the arborist's report for a full minute. Then she looked up. "Mr. Petrie, what is the relevance of root penetration to the easement claim?" Petrie nodded. He placed a fourth document on the table. A printout of State Statute 44-7-112, highlighted in yellow. Under state law, Your Honor, when a permanent agricultural improvement, including perennial plantings with established root systems, has occupied an unused easement corridor for more than 30 years without objection from the easement holder, the easement is considered functionally abandoned through adverse occupation. He looked at the judge. These trees were planted in 1958. That's 66 years ago. The roots have physically occupied the easement corridor for over 6 decades. He pointed to the roots on the tray. The easement isn't just unused. It's been grown over. Callaway's attorney was on his feet. This statute applies to agricultural improvements, not tree roots. Petrie turned to him. Roots are the agricultural improvement. He pointed to the extension report. The county extension office classifies the orchard as a permanent perennial agricultural installation. He tapped the arborist report, and the arborist confirms the root systems are structurally inseparable from the soil within the easement. Removing them would destroy the orchard. The judge leaned back. She looked at Callaway. Then she looked at the clump of roots sitting on the metal tray, soil still crumbling from the fibers. She called a recess. When the court reconvened 40 minutes later, the judge spoke directly. The plaintiff has presented a valid 1921 right-of-way filing. That is not in dispute. She paused. However, the defense has demonstrated that the easement has been continuously occupied by permanent agricultural improvements for 66 years without use or objection. She folded her hands. Under State Statute 44-7-112, the court finds that the easement has been functionally abandoned through adverse agricultural occupation. The plaintiff's claim for access is denied. She struck the gavel once. Case dismissed. Callaway sat still for nearly 10 seconds. His attorneys began gathering papers. He didn't help. He stared at the tray where the roots still sat, dark and tangled, soil slowly drying under the courtroom lights. Outside the courthouse, Russell walked slowly down the steps. A farmer from 2 counties over clapped him on the arm. "You beat a millionaire with a handful of dirt and some tree roots." Russell shook his head. "He didn't beat me." He paused on the bottom step. "He tried to buy what my mother planted." He looked toward the parking lot. "You can't buy 66 years of roots." A reporter caught him before he reached his truck. "Mr. Hadley, do you think Callaway will try again?" Russell opened the truck door. He placed the plastic bag with the roots carefully on the passenger seat. "He can try," Russell said. He started the engine. "But those trees aren't going anywhere." He looked at the reporter through the open window. "And neither am I." He drove back to the farm. The orchard on the south slope was just beginning to blossom. The oldest trees, the ones his mother had planted 66 years ago, were thick with white and pink flowers. Russell parked the truck and walked down the hill. He knelt at the base of the nearest tree and pressed the root clump back into the hole where it had been taken. He packed the soil around it with his bare hands. Then he stood up, brushed the dirt from his knees, and went inside to make lunch.